All right, welcome back to the build. Um, Today we're on bag C and bag D of the MT48 2.0 build. Again, kind of running through this without instructions here, so we'll see what happens. Like I said, I've built a few of these, racers and otherwise, so it should be interesting. I'm only kind of going back to the manual when I need to reference things like how much, oil. Or which weight oil goes in a diff, for instance. So this is bag C and D. We'll see how this goes. I'm going to put them both in the same video because they're basically the same. It's the front and rear gearbox and shock towers. And so the process is pretty much the same between the two. Let's get into it. I said I like to keep bags handy. I want to make sure that I don't throw anything away until I get done with the bag. So I'll kind of leave this bag here, stuff the other bags in it. And when I get done with everything, well, then I'll go back and start to throw everything away. Whoa, hey. That could have been fun. So in this bag, you get these differential shims. There's not much to them. They only exist as like a shim that go between your bearing and your gearbox here. I've gotten one with every Tekno kit. I will tell you that out of the box, I've never actually used one. These are more like a save for the future kind of thing. As your gearbox wears out, and it will, you'll use those shims to fill in that space that gets kind of worn out here. And that's one thing. The other thing that kind of happens sometimes is that the cups will get worn out in this direction too. The real solution is to replace the gearbox. Get a new gearbox, right? But if you're in a pinch, you can't get a gearbox straight away, you don't have one handy, one thing that you can do, and I've seen some guys do, is take some of that aluminum duct tape. And it's important that it be the metal stuff because it's going to take, the weight of the bearing and all that heat, right? So you take a little bit of the aluminum duct tape and line both sides of the cup with that aluminum duct tape, and then when it goes together, it creates the friction to close up that gap, right? Yeah, just something to think about for the future. So you can use those shims for directional gaps, and you can use some metal tape for gaps that occur sort of this way inside of the cup. All right. With these standoffs, by the way, these Tekno standoffs, these new ones are so good. The old ones were like cast or something like that, and they would go through the shock tower on their own. These, you just put a little Loctite in and drive a screw, and I mean, they're so much more sturdy than the old ones. The old ones, I used to break one almost every weekend racing. The new ones, I almost never replace. They're pretty fantastic. So great job, Tekno, there, and good job including these standoffs with this kit. What a nice inclusion there. Like I said, anytime you're going into metal and you're going to do this with the standoffs and with the drive cup, Anytime you're putting a screw in the metal, put a little bit of thread locker that they give you. I like to start by putting some thread lock in the grub screw that goes in the drive cup, just to, you know, get it going. When I put Loctite, I like to drive a screw in with the Loctite on it. As far as, you know, in this case, probably not as far as I can go because it's going to go all the way through the cup, and that's just dumb. But then I'll back it back out and then run it back in again. And I want to make sure that the Loctite is sort of slathered on all those threads. And if it looks like there's even some gaps, I'll go back and add a little bit, because I want Loctite everywhere on these things. I don't want these drive cups to ever come loose, right? Unless I loosen them. You know, if I come in here with a tool and loosen them, fine. But they should never back out on their own. If they do, you know, you're gonna have a bad day, right? You lose drive, and now you're going home from the park because, you know, your car's not moving forward anymore. And that's not fun. All right. So on these gearboxes, you'll put a bearing either side, like this. They press in. There's a little bit of friction, so, you know, you might have to press a little bit hard. So you press those bearings in, and then you'll take this pinion and run it through the gearbox like that. And you're going to remember that there's this flat here, and we're going to use that for the cup. But before we put the cup on, we want to bring this little washer, shim. You put that on your pinion. When we put the outdrive cup on, it's going to rest against that. And then put your outdrive cup on and line up your grub screw with the flat on the pinion, and then you want to crank that thing down. And when I say crank it down, I mean crank it down. Like, I like to take another screwdriver and put it through this one and send it. Because, again, I don't ever want this coming undone, right? I'm going to make that as tight as I can make it. I mean, obviously not so tight that you're going to go and strip out the thread, the socket, but tight, right? And then it should spin nice and free with the bearings. Oh, man, that feels good. All right. For the bottom of the gearbox, you're going to place these covers. Not strictly necessary, actually, but good to have just to keep dust and things like that out. And I'll take these little tiny flathead screws and a 1.5 driver. And you want to make sure not to over tighten these. These holes strip out very easily. So I had like 2 fingers, 2 finger tight. That's it. Nothing more. I love these drivers because I can keep my palm against the back of it, and it's got a spinner, and I can just twist the driver in my fingers. Nice like that. Some of the other ones just slide, or they have a rotating thing too. It's nice. But yeah, again, don't over tighten this. Just 2 fingers. That's all it takes. It's not really, you know, it's not doing a whole lot of work, right? And it's going to be down against the chassis plate anyway. So, you know, you're not going to get in trouble if it's a little under tightened here. Next, this is going to be the front end. So you're going to take your front diff and place that. Let's make sure which direction. Front gearbox Oh yeah, we had it right. Okay. The other thing to note about the gearboxes, and with these grease tubes they give you, you want to take a little bit of grease, and it doesn't take much, right? Just a little bit of grease and run it kind of around the teeth here. And you just put a little bit when you put it in the gearbox and turn the pinion on it, it'll start to spread that stuff around for you. Yeah, it's not crazy, right? Just a little grease. And then when we put it in, right, you can give it a spin and you can see that the grease kind of spreads around. It'll spread on the diff and it spreads in the teeth and everything. Kind of nice. And we'll run it through. All right. And then to finish up the diff in the gearbox, it's really just put the cover on, and you'll run some of these screws through. And again, anytime you're going into plastic, 2 fingers tight. That's it. Let the plastic do the holding. If you try to drive it in too far, you run the risk of stripping out the hole, and if you strip out the hole, you know it's time for a new gearbox, and then you got to get creative on, you know, how to get the things to hold together, right? Try to get some glue or something down in the threads, whatever. But it's better just to avoid the situation altogether by not over tightening screws going into plastic. Save yourself some trouble. I did want to check to see if I really did need that shim in that gearbox for the diff, and definitely not. Right? Like I said, hang on to these things for the future. You know, as the thing wears in, you might need them. And then again, once you go to move to a new gearbox, you're gonna have to take those shims out, probably. So yeah, 2 fingers tight, nothing fancy. No. And there's also a couple more screws here for the shock tower itself. Oh, wrong driver. I don't like to use electric tools when I'm first building a kit. I don't use electric tools when I'm first building a kit. I like to feel the screws, cut the threads. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a head thing. I prefer to know that the screw's going in and it's making good contact everywhere and all that stuff, as opposed to letting the machine just drive it in and you know, hoping for the best. I don't know. For future maintenance, after I do a build, you know, I will use electric drivers and things like that. But for whatever reason, when I first do a build, I like to drive everything by hand and, you know, let my wrist take a little bit of an abuse for it. But to me, it's a feel and confidence thing, especially with the race cars. Like I really want it. It's all about feel, right? You want to be confident with your tools, right? Your rig. Very nice. We'll also put these standoffs on. Stock position for the kit is center. Let's run that. Again, I like to put a little Loctite on the standoffs themselves here, and on the screws. Made a little bit of a mess. and your standoffs will face the front of the car. And we'll use the center position in the shock tower. I'll give you a view of what that looks like here. There's so much friction here, you almost don't need a wrench. You can tighten that down pretty well. Let the Loctite do the work. You don't want to go too tight. You won't strip it, but it puts a lot of force on the standoff, and these standoffs, when they break, they kind of split this way. They don't. So I think that having like sort of that force pulling back on it, plus the forces, you know, this way is too much. I don't know. I like better to let the Loctite kind of do the work and hold everything snug. So there's not too much pressure on the standoff itself, and it can just do all of its work in this direction as opposed to trying to keep everything together too. I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but that's just kind of a feel thing that I do. Loctite on my tray here. Right, so this is the center hole on the shock tower for reference. Excess Loctite never hurt anybody. So that's our front gearbox all made. Let's move on to bag D. Bag C is good to go. We can trash that. Bag D we'll leave till we get her together. Again, this bag should have shims. And again, you probably won't use them. Yeah, there's your shims. And the shim for the cut drive cup. All right. So this is the rear end. It's a little bit different, but not terribly. We'll go through the same basic steps and get right to the build. Like I said, I'd like to take the grub screw for these, for the outdrive here, and get some Loctite on it and get it in the dog bone, and so that it's ready to go when I'm, you know, got the gearbox together. Like I said, I like to take Loctite, run it in, back it out, run it in, back it out. Make sure it gets all in there. That's Loctite, run it all the way in, back it out. I might could use a little bit more. Now it's squeezing out, right? That's kind of what I want to see. Again, you don't ever want these things coming out without permission, right? If you don't tell them to come out, they don't come out. Same steps as the front. Insert a bearing in either side of the gearbox. Do you know I didn't notice these are -2mm gearboxes, just like the 2.2 racers. Very cool. All right, so again, pinion through the gearbox, identify your flat. You do need that other shim between the bearing and the drive end. So let's place that. We place our dog bone and make sure that we find the end there in the flat. And here again, I'm going to take another screwdriver, put it through the handle, and crank it. Because, again, I don't want this coming out without permission ever. It needs to stay in until I take it out. Nice. And rear differential goes in, facing, yes, that direction. And again, take your grease and run it around the ring. Get that grease spread around. Looks good. Now, again, it doesn't take a ton, just a little bit. Just try to keep things, you know, a little lubricated. And ideally, no dirt and things like that get into your gearbox. And as long as that's true, you know, these are pretty maintenance free. The gearboxes themselves, right? It's usually just wear and tear. Cover goes on, and then you'll drive 2 screws there. Again, going into plastic, just 2 fingers tight. Then once I get this screw in, I'll check again, see if that diff is nice and free in there, or if it's too free and I need to put a shim. I don't think so, because like I said, I never have. Not on a new gearbox. Oh yeah, that's plenty tight. Perfect. The bottom. Tiny flathead screws. And again, you want to make sure not to over tighten these. Just 2 fingers, that's it. Nothing fancy. They're not doing a lot of work. Oops. And then shock tower. It's too bright. Mm-hmm. 2 fingers tight. Again, you really just want to let the screw do the holding, let the threads do the holding. You know, you just put them in flush, you know, so things aren't moving around, and that's really all you need to do. Anything more, and you either strip it out while you're driving it in, or you'll strip it out as soon as you take a crash or two. Again, for these standoffs, I'd like to put a little Loctite on both the standoff and the screw. I should mention that an alternative to using the standoffs in this way is to, instead of using a button head screw, which, you know, we tend to think has a little bit more risk of stripping out, you know, with the driver in it than other screws. You know, a button head screw works perfectly fine, I'll say, but what we'd like to do on the race kits instead is put a countersink washer, like your motor mount screws, things like that, a countersink washer and a countersink screw that's around the same size, and so that way you have a larger screw head to bite into, is the idea, right? Some more meat. You know, again, I don't know if it makes a difference, but confidence thing, a feel thing, all those things. Again, I don't like to crank those things down. They don't need to be super heavy. Let the threads do the job. I mean, they're not going anywhere, but like they're also not torqued way down. You know what I mean? You don't need to go nuts. Right, so that's bag C and D done. Yeah. If you have any questions, comments, you know, leave them down below. Pretty simple build so far. Everything's going together nice and easy. Tekno's really good at that. Look forward to the next video. We'll do bag E and get the rest of this thing going. Thanks, everybody. Make sure to like and subscribe.